Thank you so much and good afternoon. So, is it possible that one of the biggest obstacles to our success, to our growth, to even our self-actualization is what we already know? I mean, we assume often that we know how our mind works. We assume that we know what we know. But do we? Really? So this afternoon, we're going to look firstly a little bit through the lens of evolutionary psychology and the idea that babies are not born as a blank slate, tabula rasa, but rather, actually, from even before birth, we have a sophisticated neural architecture that continues to drive us and shape us throughout our entire lives. You could call it our human operating system. And then secondly, the idea that learning isn't just a formal process that happens in schools, but really it's a much more messy, unpredictable, constant process that happens all around us through experience and stimuli. And thirdly, the role of schools in developing greater cognitive flexibility to allow us to really face the challenges of this really very rapidly changing world. So, it often amazes me that babies, infants, are able to learn a language in around 2 years, or in this case, 2 languages, despite the fact that the adults, the significant adults in a baby's life, who are usually sensible, educated people, when faced with a baby, start talking absolute nonsense. It's a pretty, pretty little thing, milky, milky. And despite all of this, babies universally, across all cultures, learn to speak. And that's because babies are born with a set of neural structures that allow them to learn, despite our best efforts as adults to confuse them. And of course, babies are also born with other very powerful communication tools. I mean, this sort of heart-rending cry that gets our attention, or this mesmerizing smile, or even the little kicks in the womb that can start as early as 16 weeks into pregnancy. A lot of people argue that one of the functions of that kicking isn't that a fetus needs exercise, but that it creates bonding between the mother and the baby, and even the baby and the close family around it. So this pre-programming that we're born with actually goes back an awfully long way. And it was developed really in our prehistory, in the Pleistocene era, a process driven through evolution, which has brought us to where we are today, but it's very slow. And biology and biological adaptations have not been able to keep up with the pace of human and societal growth. The thing is, we're running modern apps on Stone Age software. Now, you may have noticed the smell of popcorn outside. This kind of an image may have some of you looking at your watch and thinking, is it time for a snack? Maybe some of you are salivating. See, the thing is, we are attracted to high-energy foods, fat and sugar. And that made perfect sense when we were hunter-gatherers. Now, it's just driving the consumption of processed and fast food. It's leading to an obesity crisis. It's heart disease, all sorts of problems. And we know it deep down. But our dopamine reward circuits just are too much for us sometimes. this dopamine reward system that we have, that really was very powerful for our survival hundreds of thousands of years ago, also now leads to addictive behaviors, unhealthy behaviors, and even this very modern phenomenon of doom scrolling on screens. Boo! Fun fact, in the United States, you are 16,000 times more likely to be killed by a bullet than a spider bite. And yet, a lot of studies have shown, interesting psychological studies, where a series of images are shown to candidates, which include images of guns and images of spiders. The guns have very little impact on people, the images of guns. Spiders do. Our instinctive innate programming makes us afraid of certain insects, which are largely harmless, whereas modern contemporary devices that cause far more deaths just don't do the same, because our programming was from a past time. This is it. We are programmed to be tribal. We like to form in-groups where we can exchange privileged information, which is another way of saying we gossip. But these in-groups can dislike, reject, even fear people that look or speak differently, people that have different beliefs. Now, this was a logical and protective system for prehistory, when we lived in small groups roaming the savannah. But now, potentially, it just creates prejudice and polarization. Even our attraction to charismatic leaders made sense in terms of survival when we were dealing typically with short-term emergencies that needed quick decision-making. But in our modern complex societies, that kind of charismatic style over substance-based leadership can be persuasive, but it's also risky because they tend to be risk takers. Now, layered on top of that pre-programmed structure that we have, we're constantly forming and strengthening neural connections, sometimes letting them weaken too. It's driven through experience, it's happening right now, the stimuli around us, and that's what learning is. It's a physical, biological, and chemical process. So we have these two systems constantly occurring. And of course, we tend to see schools as being the home of learning. But I think we overestimate how much we learn happens in a school. And we underestimate how much is simply down to constant, permanent interactions with family, with friends, with peers, engagement with media, and of course, social media. But it's easier to understand learning in schools because we kind of put everything into these boxes and we label it. Math, science, and Spanish, and English, and history, and so on. I know if I'm learning about quadratic equations that lives in the math box. It's clear. I learned something. And these are things that we then reinforce through memorization, through exams, and so on. And even when we start to forget how to solve a quadratic equation or a long division, because we don't do that anymore, and those neural pathways are degrading, we still know that we once knew it. And we still know that it belongs in the math box, so it's clear. But all of this learning that's happening outside of the classroom, this messy, unpredictable learning that's just occurring through human engagement, we don't have a label for that. We can't stack it and sort it and put it in boxes. It's pretty random. And that makes it much harder for us to understand that it's learning going on at all. We give it another name. We call it culture. So I want to give a couple of examples of what I mean here. This is a very much younger me. Now, I grew up in England, and in England, punctuality is considered a virtue. And people who are not punctual are seen as being disrespectful and possibly slightly deviant. Never thought very much about it until 20-something years ago. I came to live and work in Colombia's Caribbean coast. Beautiful place, but a slightly more fluid concept of what time means. Now, I was the first foreign hire teacher in that school, and all of the other teachers and staff were Colombian. And I thought I was right and they were wrong, because I was manically punctual and nobody else was, and it was really tough. I found it really hard. It made me miserable sometimes because everyone was late, and I made everyone miserable around me because I was upset. I had to unlearn some things, and I had to learn that punctuality isn't about being right or wrong, that there are different cultural approaches to time. I had to learn that in a conflict, I could be the problem, and I had to rethink how I approach time. And another perspective here that really concerns me is around notions of corruption, particularly the perception of corruption. So Transparency International, you see here, there's a strong perception of corruption in Latin America and Colombia. In fact, if you dig in, 20% of Colombians, according to their study, bribed a public official during the last year at some point. Now, if you flip that, that's pretty bad, but if you flip it, it also means 80% of people didn't. Now, in some research I've done, a lot of children, through what they hear from significant adults around them, start to believe that all politicians, all public servants are inherently corrupt. Now, as schools, we try and form values-driven citizens who can change the future. But at the same time, we're also telling them that politics is a dead end. We're teaching them that there is no solution, and we don't even know we're doing it. So there are things that we have to unlearn, and not all learning is good. Now, there's a couple of risks that I really want to focus on here. One, because of this tribal mentality that I mentioned earlier, together with some of our modern cultural learning, we are vulnerable to bad actors who manipulate populations through prejudice and through polarization. And we need to be deeply aware of our propensity to fall into this trap, so that we're not repeating the mistakes, the worst crimes of humanity that we saw in the 20th century and we're even seeing now. Secondly, this cultural programming is a barrier, an obstacle to meaningful change. For example, we love consumerism, and yet we know deep down that shopping, online shopping, fast fashion, constantly acquiring stuff is neither good for the planet or good for some of the exploited workers in other countries that suffer from this. But we do it. We keep buying, we keep buying. We also, we have a heavily meat-based diet, even though we know it's not sustainable. Because although we know it's not necessarily great, the combination of dopamine, our identity, and social norms keep us moving down that path. They lead us to think things like single-use packaging is convenient. The bigger and newer the car, the more successful we are. Certain logos indicate status. It's all cultural learning, and it's all getting in the way and obstaculating our process. So, this is a mandala from Tibet. It's very intricate. It's made from colored sand. Days, weeks of work, and once complete, as a symbol of the impermanence in life and letting things go. It's just simply destroyed. Now, our brains are also intricate and beautiful, but they're not very good at letting go. The only way we can really do it is to form new neural pathways that act against some of these darker sides of our nature. We have to build stronger neural pathways that take us where we need to go. And as I said before, that's a chemical, physical, biological process that needs work. Now, schools have become a lot better at teaching critical thinking. We have more engaging learning environments. But the next step, the hardest step, is to become meaningful agents of change and start to intentionally teach students how to unlearn things that are harmful or outdated thinking. And that's not easy, because learning is inherently cultural and it's political. Schools can be agents of cultural reproduction and, at worst, agents of political control. But again, we can be agents of sustainable, meaningful change. And as well as being seats of learning, we can become seats of unlearning. Because right now, in this rapidly changing world, the challenges we face, unlearning might be the only chance we have left. Thank you.